Hey Bert, can I ask you something? Are you a night owl? You know, the kind who hits their stride while others are just starting to wind down? You're a bit slow to gather energy in the morning, but hit full power later in the day. Or are you like me, an early before sunrise, taking advantage of those quiet hours when your mind is sharpest and the world hasn't quite woken up yet? These rhythms aren't quirks, they're biology. And understanding them is absolutely essential if you want to optimize your health, metabolism, and long-term well-being. Let me explain. In episode 2 of Chasing Dexter, we learnt that calorie restriction, or CR, can extend lifespan across a wide range of organisms, from yeast all the way through to primates. Research shows that reducing caloric intake can slow the body's metabolic rate, allowing energy systems to settle and recover. It can lower chronic inflammation, creating a calmer, less reactive internal environment. It can improve insulin sensitivity, making it easier for the body to move and use glucose efficiently. It can reduce cardiovascular risk markers that influence long-term heart and blood vessel health. And it can enhance overall metabolic efficiency, allowing the entire system to work in a more balanced, coordinated way. But we also learnt that longevity boost comes at a cost. In humans, strict calorie restriction can cause loss of muscle and strength, increase the risk of osteoporosis, reduce thyroid function, and leave you feeling persistently fatigued. And that's before we even consider the psychological effects: irritability, mood swings, and social withdrawal. Obesity is a global health crisis, driving chronic disease and premature mortality. But is just eat less really the answer? Or are there smarter strategies that give us the benefits of reduced energy intake without the downsides? In this episode, we're going to explore exactly that and look at how each of us can weave these approaches into a personalized longevity plan. And I do mean personalized, because scientists now know that longevity isn't a one-size-fits-all. Each of us has a unique metabolism, and that should shape any long-term strategy. Hi, my name's Alan Virtue. Welcome back to Chasing Dexter. Three widely discussed approaches dominate the longevity conversation: calorie restriction, or CR, intermittent fasting, and time-restricted feeding, or TRF. You've heard the terms everywhere, from scientific journals to wellness blogs. But what actually happens when we look underneath the buzzwords? What's really going on in ourselves? And more importantly, what does the evidence actually say? Let's start with some clear definitions, because these terms are often confused. Calorie restriction, or CR, is about how much you eat. It's a consistent reduction in calories, often 20 to 50%, without malnutrition. Intermittent fasting, IF, is about whether you eat at a given moment. It uses cycles of fasting and feeding, alternate days fasting, the 5-2 diet, and similar patterns. Time-restricted feeding, or TRF, is about when you eat. All food is consumed within a daily window, perhaps 8 or 10 hours, followed by a regular fast. Now, at first glance, these may look similar, but in reality, they act through fundamentally different biological mechanisms. Much of our understanding comes from model organisms, yeasts, worms, flies, rodents, where tightly controlled experiments are possible in ways that human trials can't be. Historically, CR delivered astonishing results. Up to a 30% lifespan increase in rats, around 15% in mice, and major reductions in cancer, neurodegeneration, and heart disease. CR became the gold standard of anti-aging research. But when scientists tested intermittent fasting in the same models, the results were mixed. Some fasting regimens extended lifespan, others had no effect, and some actually reduced lifespan, especially when fasting began later in life. The outcome depended heavily on the animal's genetic strain, a reminder that biology is deeply individual. Still, one point was unmistakable: the survival advantages of fasting are ancient. We see IF-like responses in organisms as simple as bacteria. It's a deeply conserved evolutionary strategy. Then came time-restricted feeding. Researchers noticed something unexpected. Calorie-restricted mice naturally cluster their food intake into narrow windows, essentially putting themselves on TRF without any prompting. But the real breakthrough was this: TRF improved health and survival even when total calories and diet composition were identical to mice that were eating freely. Nothing changed except the timing. This single finding forced scientists to rethink decades of assumption. It suggested that when you eat can be powerful enough to influence and even override how much you eat, triggering biological shifts that calorie reduction alone cannot explain. Despite their differences, CR, IF, and TRF all influence the same core molecular pathways, the internal switches governing growth, repair, and resilience. At the center of all of these pathways, calorie restriction, fasting, and meal timing, sits one hormone that quietly decides what your body does with the energy. That hormone is insulin. To understand why insulin matters for longevity, we need to look at how it shapes the body's choice between storage and repair. And to understand what insulin does, we need to look at how it affects two types of cells, fat cells and muscle cells. Whenever we eat foods that raise blood glucose, particularly sugars and refined carbohydrates, insulin levels rise. But insulin's role goes far beyond controlling blood sugar. Its deeper function is to signal abundance, to tell the body that energy is plentiful and that growth and storage can take priority over maintenance. One visible way this plays out is through its effects on fat and muscle tissue. On fat cells, insulin activates an enzyme called lipoprotein lipase, or LPL, which sits on the cell surface like a gatekeeper. When insulin is high, LPL pulls circulating fat out of the bloodstream and moves it into fat cells for storage. At the same time, insulin suppresses LPL activity in muscle cells. In practical terms, this nudges muscle away from burning fat and towards using glucose instead. The result is a coordinated signal. Energy is stored efficiently and immediate fuel use shifts towards glucose. Over time, this can create a mismatch. Energy accumulates in fat tissue while muscle cells become relatively underfueled. Fatigue rises, physical capacity drops, and from the outside, this can look like overeating or a lack of motivation. From the inside, it's a signaling issue. Insulin also controls what happens to fat that's already been stored. Inside fat cells is another enzyme, hormone-sensitive lipase, or HCl, responsible for releasing stored fat when energy is needed, such as during fasting or exercise. When insulin is high, HSL is suppressed. Fat flows in easily, but it doesn't flow out. Energy is present, but locked away. When insulin levels fall, the situation reverses. LPL activity in the fat cells declines. HSL becomes active again. Stored fat is released into the bloodstream, muscle cells can once again burn fat for fuel, and energy becomes available. So insulin doesn't just respond to what you eat. It also responds to when you eat. Every time you eat, insulin rises. Every time you don't, it falls. And that simple rhythm, the rise and fall of insulin across the day, turns out to be one of the most powerful levers we have for influencing metabolism, fat storage, and long-term health. This is where time-restricted feeding begins to look fundamentally different. Once insulin sets a direction, storage or release, it feeds into a much larger network of cellular decision-making. These include regulators like mTOR, AMPK, IGF-1, and the sirtuins. You don't need to memorize these names. What matters is what they do collectively. When energy is abundant and insulin remains high, these systems favor growth and reproduction. When energy becomes limited through calorie restriction, fasting, or time-restricted eating, the balance shifts towards repair, recycling, and long-term maintenance. In this episode, we're staying at the systems level, how eating patterns influence longevity as a whole. But in future episodes, we'll zoom in on individual pathways like mTOR, AMPK, and the sirtuins, and explore what the science actually says about targeting them directly through lifestyle, nutrition, and emerging therapies. So where does time-restricted feeding fit into this? Well, unlike calorie restriction, TRF doesn't necessarily reduce total energy intake. Instead, it reshapes the daily rhythm of insulin and energy availability. And that rhythm, not just the calories, is what these longevity-related systems respond to. TRF compresses eating into a consistent daily window, often 8 to 10 hours. That creates predictable cycles of insulin rise and fall, growth and repair, aligned with the circadian biology. It's not just about eating less. It's about when growth is allowed and when repair is prioritized. TRF can be a powerful ally in the fight to maintain metabolic health, particularly if used in combination with calorie restriction. But the goal isn't to live on the edge of hunger. It's to activate the body's natural repair systems without harming metabolism, strength, or quality of life. So here's how to create a strategy that fits you. First of all, protect the foundations of long-term health. Support your metabolism before restricting anything. Ensure you obtain sufficient protein, undertake resistance training, maintain consistent energy, and get adequate sleep. If these are missing, calorie restriction becomes damaging instead of beneficial. Number 2, use TRF as your daily anchor. The easiest, most sustainable starting point is time-restricted feeding. The consistent 8 to 10 hour eating window aligns your body with its natural circadian rhythm, improving insulin sensitivity, digestive efficiency, and metabolic stability, even without cutting calories. Number 3, add gentle calorie reduction, not harsh dieting. You don't need to slash calories. Research shows that even a 10 to 12% reduction delivers measurable benefits, and this can come from reducing evening eating, trimming portion sizes slightly, replacing processed foods with whole foods, and prioritizing protein early in the day. These small adjustments create natural calorie restriction without hunger or fatigue. Number 4, use intermittent fasting as a strategic tool. IF is best used occasionally. Examples include one 24-hour fast every week or two, a 5-2 pattern in certain periods, skipping a meal after heavy eating day, or a short fast during travel or low activity days. IF works best when it's flexible, not when it's forced. Number 5 is to track your body's feedback, because biology is personal. Your body's signal is the algorithm. The right plan is the one your body responds to. You want stable hunger, good morning energy, strength improvements, steady sleep, improved glucose patterns, and reduced food cravings. So, how do you find your personal TRF window? This brings us to one of the most important ideas in modern circadian science. Your optimal TRF schedule is determined by your internal clock, not the clock on the wall. How TRF works in practice will differ from person to person. The key takeaway here is individuality. Most people follow social time, that is, work schedules, family routines, alarms, but your biology runs on circadian time, a personal rhythm influenced by genetics, light exposure, sleep, wake cycles, and habitual routines. In general, early chronotypes, that is, morning types, do best with early TRF. Late chronotypes, that is, evening types, may benefit from a shifted window, but still ending earlier than they expect. Nearly everyone benefits from avoiding food in the last 3 to 4 hours before bedtime. TRF can be powerful, but timing matters and context matters. If timing matters, then your eating window becomes measurable. How long you're in a fed state each day. How long does insulin stay elevated? To explore that, I built myself a simple TRF calculator, not to prescribe anything, but to visualize my own current rhythm. The calculator asks questions like, what time do you naturally wake up without an alarm? When does your appetite naturally kick in? And what time do you usually stop eating? And from these patterns, a circadian midpoint can be estimated, and from that, an optimal eating window. If you'd like to try it out for yourself, I've left the link below. It's totally free to use, and it might just get you started on your longevity quest. Let me know how you find it. So to recap, longevity isn't about starving yourself or following trends or forcing biology into a pattern that it doesn't fit. It's about discovering the rhythm your body is already trying to follow and shaping your lifestyle around the biology that makes you uniquely you. Because personalized longevity doesn't start with a restriction. It starts with alignment. And aligning your eating window with your own circadian rhythm may be one of the most powerful steps you can take. But in the meantime, please like, subscribe, and comment below. Your participation and support really helps grow the channel and spread the message. Thank you for watching Chasing Dexter. I'll catch you in the next episode very soon. Bye for now.